I asked AI what the prosecution should say in their closing arguments. If they really want to convince the jury Karen Read is guilty. Here's what it gave me, and tell me if this would change your mind, or what you would argue in closing statements if you were the prosecution to win this case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this isn't about internet theories. It's not about YouTube timelines or Reddit threads that twist doubt into drama. This is about a man who is dead, a decorated Boston police officer, John O'Keefe, a father figure, a son, and a friend, and the evidence that tells his story for him. On January 29th, 2022, John O'Keefe was left to die in a snowbank. The person responsible for that outcome is seated at this table. You don't need a conspiracy. You don't need a confession. What you have and what you must rely on is the evidence, and it speaks clearly. Let's begin with what's not in dispute. Karen Read was intoxicated. That's not disputed. Karen Read was angry. That's not disputed. Karen Read drove John O'Keefe to 34 Fairview Road. That's not disputed. Karen Read's vehicle was damaged. Her taillight shattered. Fragments of that taillight were found in the snow where John's body lay. John suffered blunt force injuries to his head and upper body. He was hypothermic, unconscious, left exposed for hours. What is disputed is whether she left him there safely or hit him with her SUV and left him there to die in the cold. And Karen Read's own words, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." Those are not the words of someone in shock. Those are the words of someone whose mind is already forming a defense. Now, what does the defense ask you to believe? That John O'Keefe was killed inside that house. That every homeowner, every first responder, and every investigator is either incompetent or complicit. That despite zero evidence inside the home, no blood, no struggle, no DNA, this was somehow an orchestrated cover-up. Ask yourselves, is that reasonable or is that desperation? We brought you data, vehicle telemetry placing her at the scene. We brought you glass, tail light fragments directly correlated to her SUV. We brought you trauma analysis, impact injuries inconsistent with a fist fight, but entirely consistent with being struck by a vehicle. And we brought you motive, intoxication, emotionally volatile, and a relationship marked by control, jealousy, and rage. Karen Read didn't just hit John O'Keefe. She left him. She didn't call for help. She didn't circle back. She didn't say, "I need to make this right." She said, "Tell me it wasn't me," because she already knew. This is not a case of doubt. This is a case of accountability. You don't need to like the Commonwealth. You don't need to sympathize with the victim. You just need to follow the evidence. And the evidence tells you this. Karen Read caused the death of John O'Keefe through her own reckless conduct. And then she tried to outrun the truth by hiding inside the chaos. But chaos doesn't cancel fact. Not when you've got a taillight glass in the snow. Not when you've got blunt force trauma and hypothermia. Not when the only person who drove him there, the only one with access, with motive, and with time is sitting in the courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, if the defense had any real proof that John O'Keefe was killed inside that house, you'd have seen it. But instead, they gave you doubt, cleverly curated, emotionally packaged, and not backed by evidence. Reasonable doubt is not a guessing game. It's not a gut feeling. It's not maybe. It's not what if. It's based on reason, and all reason points to the same place. Karen Read hit John O'Keefe with her SUV, and then she left him there. That is not an accident. That is not a mystery. That is a crime. And today, you're not just jurors. You are the voice of justice for a man who wore a badge, for a man who will never go home again. So ask yourself one last question. If it wasn't her, then who? And why did the glass match her car? Why did her own words betray her? Why did she ask the one question no innocent person asks? Did I hit him? Because she did. And now it's time to say what she's spent 2 years avoiding. Guilty of second-degree murder, manslaughter, of leaving the scene, of causing the death of a man she claimed she loved, then left to die alone. Return the verdict that facts allow. Guilty on all counts. So, what did you think of Chat's closing arguments for the prosecution? How would you argue the case for the prosecution? If I was on the jury, I would not convict by that closing argument. There is too much doubt. But even being as biased as I am, if I was on the jury without the TikTok fodder and without the internet, I think I would still convict her of obviously the drunk driving and leaving the scene. Because in her own words, in interviews she's done, she has said she was not sure if he got in the house safely. And unfortunately for her, he didn't. So something terrible did happen that night and she doesn't remember. All right. Thank you, and stay tuned for AI's version of the defense arguments.